Yes, we finally have high-end Apple Silicon chips in these insanely powerful M1 MacBook Pros. And as much as I want to say for video editors, go Macs or go home, I am not going to say that. And thankfully, I don't have to because some of these configurations are going to be insanely fast without having to break the bank. So in this video, I'll give you guys all my suggestions for which specs you should get depending on what you do. This video is sponsored by SquareSpace, the best way to make an amazing website. Hey guys, it's Max. I am incredibly excited. We already made a couple of videos on the MacSec channel, which is my main focus, but I want to put out a video for all of you guys that are focusing on video editing, diving deep into what you guys should buy. Now, Vadim just finished shooting a buyer's guide for everybody else, covering some video, photography, coders, people who work with music, all sorts of different categories. So that is on the MacSec channel, but here we're gonna dive deep into video editing. Now, I don't wanna cover the machines themselves. We did that already on that channel. Let's start out with a 14-inch model. And before I jump into the configurations here, I do wanna mention that for the first time ever, you can get the same exact config on a 14 or a 16-inch model. In the past, the 13-inch MacBook Pros were way slower, both in CPU and graphics, than the 16-inch. Now, we may have some differences in terms of thermal throttling and how loud the fans go, and I will actually be doing a comparison because I actually ordered 8 different MacBooks. I ordered the same configs for a 14-inch and a 16, the top ones, to see if there's any differences in heat and if one slows down, the 14-inch model. I also ordered different amounts of cores and RAM. So we're gonna do a lot of videos on the MacSec channel and on this one, diving deeper here into video editing. So make sure you guys are subscribed to both. Now, right away, you guys see that we have a $2,000 price point and a $2,500 price point. If you start out with the $2,500 one, you are forced into 1 terabyte of SSD along with the CPU upgrades and the graphics upgrades. So let's go ahead and start out with the $2,000 option. And what I will say, a lot of you guys might not believe it, but if you've been watching videos that we've made over the last year, you should. And that is that for most people, this base $2,000 model is enough for their video editing work. Now, to prove that, I've been editing so many videos on this M1 MacBook Air, and it literally has half the graphics performance, slower encoders, half of the RAM, and it is literally handling work that I would need a laptop that was over $3,000 previously. First, let's talk about the RAM. I'm gonna dive into that because at the base we have 16 gigs now instead of 8. Now, 16 gigs is great for everybody, and from our testing in the last year, 16 gigs of Apple's unified memory actually acts like 32 gigs of the previous memory for a couple of reasons. Well, first off, we actually did tests and we showed how they performed on the MacSec channel, not only in video editing, but in having tons of Chrome tabs open, multiple professional applications open, and the unified memory is so much quicker, and this will actually be even better. And that's also because of the tile memory for the graphics, also because of swapping that works really well, also because of the speed and how close it is to the processor. It runs through what has to be in the RAM much faster and more efficient. Now, with that, if you're somebody that bought 32 gigs in the past with their previous Intel models like I did, 16 gigs will be enough for most of you guys. Now, some of you might say, hey, I love having Final Cut open or Davinci Resolve, and at the same time, I need, say, After Effects, and I have Photoshop open and Lightroom and 30, 40 browser tabs. Well, in that case, yeah, you probably want to have 32 gigs of RAM, but if you're somebody like me, you have 1 or 2 applications open, 5, 10 tabs, you don't need 32 gigs of memory. Now, with the SSDs in this machine, they now run at 7.4 gigabytes a second, and macOS will write RAM to the SSD whether you like it or not, even if you go and get the 64 gigabyte model, which I don't recommend for almost anybody out there. Now, with my Mac Pro, I have 192 gigs of RAM. Typically, it sits at about 40 gigs of use when I'm doing video editing, and I even have like a Photoshop project open, and it is still writing to the SSD, even though it has 192 gigs left over. And if you don't have enough, it will do that more often. It will compress more memory and it'll be a lot more efficient. So I wasted money for the Mac Pro. Don't do the same here. And in the past, with the 16-inch MacBook Pros, I told people don't buy 64 gigs of RAM unless you have money to throw away. You don't need it. Well, now it's an even bigger reason not to get 64 gigs. And if you are on a budget, stick with 16 gigabytes. Now, as far as SSD, I want to cover this for both machines before getting into the CPU and graphics cores. The base is 512. You can upgrade to 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte. Before I told people, you know what, go external, costs a lot less. You can unplug it when you upgrade your machine. You can still use it, plug it into other machines. It's a lot more versatile, less costly. But in this situation, Apple is spending way more money on these new SSDs. These are the top of line machines. You can't get this externally, and they haven't raised the price. So for $200, I would absolutely go for 1 terabyte, and even for the 2 terabyte option, you're getting a pretty good deal. Now, when you go up to 4 terabytes or 8, if you have money to throw away, go ahead. But personally, if you're working projects that big, you'll probably have to work with external hard drive solutions anyways, or servers. So I wouldn't go above 2 terabytes. That's a personal choice. Now, let's get into the CPU and GPUs. I mentioned most people should go with the base model, and even though I don't like seeing the Apple is binning these, which means that they're slowing them down on purpose or using chips that aren't perfectly complete for full performance, but it's good enough if you disable some cores. So as you see, instead of getting the M1 Pro on the 16-inch, which comes with 16-core graphics and 10-core CPU, we're down to 8-core and 14-core. Now, I don't like seeing that, but is that a huge deal? No, not really. Now, for example, here, they're getting rid of 2 of the 8 performance cores and then all 2 out of the 16 graphics cores. And so you will actually get, with this base model, you will get 20% less CPU performance than the base 16-inch, or 20% less if you compare to spending an extra $200 to unlock the full 10-core CPU. Now, I don't think that matters because within the last 2-3 years, the video editing has shifted way more towards graphics and way more towards having dedicated encoders. So with this MacBook Air, it can handle multiple streams of 4K, it can handle multicam, and it can also handle a lot of graphics thrown at it. So if you're working with standard Sony footage, Panasonic, Canon, even the 10-bit 422 C-Log files, you're not pushing your CPU. Your CPU will sit at 20-30% performance. So if you spend the extra $200, that will give you nothing. And then when you export, you have dedicated encoders. So instead of using the CPU, it uses those special chips to do that. So once again, you're not pushing your CPU any more so. So for video editing specifically, that will literally get you nothing. And then the final exporting speed is going to be the same. Now, as far as graphics, if you want to spend the extra money, you actually have to get the better CPU before going up from a 14-core graphics up to a 16-core, and then so that costs you $300 more. So you are getting 15% more cores, which means maybe 10 to 15% more graphics performance for the extra price. Now, the same thing goes for graphics. This M1 with 7-core graphics can actually handle Canon R5 footage with 2 LUTs and color corrections applied without maxing out the graphics. So if I'm doing the same project on one of these new 14-inch MacBook Pros with this M1 Pro chip, it will not work any faster. It will not play back any smoother because it's already perfectly smooth. It's only when you stack more LUTs, more color corrections, if you're doing primary and secondary color corrections, you're doing animations, you're stacking a lot of effects, and you're maxing out the graphics, that's when you will get benefit. And I think, in my opinion, that extra 15% of graphics performance is not worth that extra $300 of price point, at least for bang for the buck. Now, for most people that are working with compressed footage, the base model is going to be great and you're gonna have a great time editing. Now, if you are somebody that works with tougher footage, you're stacking a lot of effects, that's when I will say automatically, instead of just spending $300 more, you want to actually spend the extra money and jump to the M1 Max chip. Now, before I go into that, I'm actually going to switch over to the 16-inch configuration because both of them have those options, and we'll talk about it there. But first, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this video, and that is SquareSpace. If you've been thinking about making your own website, Squarespace is seriously the best way to go. You can build a great looking website like we did with literally no web making experience, and it doesn't matter if you want a portfolio, a blog, e-commerce, or anything else. You just choose from one of their great templates and customize blocks of text and images. It's incredibly simple, it's affordable, and ours have been running flawlessly for many years now and bringing in a lot of traffic thanks to its built-in SEO tools. And we know that's what matters. If you make a website, you want people to be able to actually find it. Start your free 2-week trial with no credit card required by going to squarespace.com/MaxYuryev or by using the custom link down below. And when you're ready to launch, you will save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. So here are the configurations for the 16-inch model. I honestly don't know why they put 3 of them here. Maybe because they've always had 3, because the middle one only goes up by $200. And all they do is just kick up your SSD speed. Actually, you know what? Let me go back to the 14-inch. I have something very important to show you guys. The 14-inch, the base model comes with a 67-watt power adapter instead of the 96-watt for the $2,500 model. Now, with that, the difference there is the 67-watt doesn't have fast charging. So what you could do if you're taking my recommendation and you're buying the base model, you can actually go down and spend $20 more right over there, 20 bucks more, and get the 96-watt. I would definitely do that. You want to be able to charge it to 50% in 30 minutes. That is a big improvement. All right, back to the 16-inch. Let's go ahead and get started with that $2,500 configuration. In this one, the same exact thing goes. I would highly recommend for somebody that wants great performance and they want the largest display, this base model is going to be amazing. The M1s already do an amazing job. We literally switched from our iMac Pro, which costs $5,000, to an M1 iMac, which I believe the model that we got, we upgraded the RAM to 16 gig from 8. It was $1,700, and that iMac is faster in every single way. And even though it has 16 gigs of memory compared to 32, it is way quicker at opening stuff when we have the RAM filled up way faster. So anyways, with this system, you're literally getting double the graphics performance. The encoders are newer. It can decode and encode ProRes. I'm gonna talk about that in just a sec. And you have double the CPU performance, or close to double as well. So this thing is gonna throw almost anything that you wanna throw at it. It will do a great job. Now, just like before, the RAM stuff stays the same, the SSD stuff stays the same. You guys could decide on that. Personally, I'll let you guys know, I bought 32 gigs of RAM because I did upgrade to the higher M1 Max CPU. I mean, my name is Max, of course I had to do that. So they do force you, if you upgrade, to go to 32 gigs of RAM, and that is fine. I would not spend the extra for 64, even if you have a lot of stuff open. But with this system, one thing that is incredible are the new encoders and decoders. For years now, you have been limited when you're exporting a video to the encoder. So for example, my Mac Pro, I have a beastly graphics card, which by the way, the 32-core graphics with the M1 Max will actually be right there along with my Mac Pro. But the exporting speed was always not that fast. It was actually limited, and I couldn't make full use of my graphics card because the encoders were the limiting factor. Well, Apple made them much better. And with that Mac Pro, I spent $2,000 on the Afterburner, which took the load off of the CPU to be able to transcode ProRes a little bit faster and take off the workload from decoding ProRes or ProRes RAW. $2,000. This MacBook can actually do it better, at least with the M1 Max chip, but even the base model has that decoding capability. And with that, it can encode ProRes, meaning instead of maxing out your CPU when you're encoding ProRes, when you're saving it, exporting it, transcoding, the actual special chip does it. So your CPU is just chilling there, not doing much at all. Now, if you are working with ProRes RAW, or you're working with 8K, or you're working with Blackmagic RAW or Canon RAW, that's when I will say, hey, it is absolutely worth going for the higher end M1 Max chip because you do need that extra graphics performance. Now, when you go to this higher end chip, you have two options. You can spend $200 or $400. And I have a recommendation for both types of people that might want to upgrade. Obviously, if you have the money, you can go for the 32 core like I did. But if you are on a budget, I think that $200 option is a great option to go. Now, first off, you get the extra cores, which is nice. You're going to get more graphics performance. But second, not only are you getting better graphics performance for $200, you are doubling your output as far as displays from 2 displays to 4. You're doubling the amount of encoders. So you actually have twice the speed of exporting a video. So even if you don't need the extra raw graphics performance, which most people don't, you will double that speed. And same thing for the amount of layers that you can work with if you're working with multicam, and same thing goes for 8K footage as well. So I would say if you're already going for 32 gigs of RAM, absolutely go for the M1 Max. If you're working with a more expensive higher end configuration, not like the base 14-inch model. Now with that, of course, you can spend another $200 and get the extra cores for the 32 core GPU. I did that just because the configuration that I bought ended up being $3,500. It was cheaper than the 16-inch, cheaper, same price or cheaper than all the years in the past with way more performance. But the only people that I think should actually get that or actually need that is if you're working with raw footage for the debayering, or if you're doing tons of color corrections with multicam files, and you know you're gonna hit that to the max, at least for video editing. Or you're doing a lot of, for example, stabilizing, it's gonna speed that up, or analyzing footage for the new Final Cut feature where it can do tracking. All of that is graphics based, so that will speed it up. But for most people, you don't really need to do that. And with this 32 core, it literally beats out my Mac Pro. The CPU beats it out. The graphics card is close into performance. It beats out the $2,000 Afterburner, and you don't have to spend an extra $2,000 here. It can encode. It is absolutely mind-blowing. So the model that I bought was a 32 core. I got 32 gigs of RAM, and I got the 1 terabyte SSD for $3,500. But if you're on a budget, even going with the base model chip with the 16 core graphics, and going for 16 gigabytes of unified memory, and then sticking with the 1 terabyte SSD just because you need the storage, for $2,700, this machine will outperform the previous best highest end 8-core i9 5600M MacBook Pro that had 32 gigs of RAM, and that one cost $4,100. This will smoke it for $2,700. So don't feel like just because Apple gave us extra options, because the base prices went up a little bit, you have to spend more money. Apple is actually saving you money. So the highest end, if you go with the highest end graphics, you also go for 32 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte SSD. So you get the best CPU, best GPU. It is now $600 cheaper than it was a couple days ago. So on the higher end, the prices did actually go down. And of course, we have all of those other upgrades. So there you guys go. I think for most people, just get the base configuration. And if you don't mind the smaller size, or you want the smaller size, get the base configuration for that 14-inch model. For the 16-inch, for most people, even the base model will smoke whatever you have by a good margin. And then in that case, you can upgrade a little bit extra RAM, or you can upgrade the SSD if you want to. Now, if you choose to upgrade the RAM, you know you're gonna go for a 32 gig. In that case, that's where I would say go for the 24-core GPU, because you're already spending a lot of money. Your percentage of price doesn't go up by that much if you add that, and you're getting extra capability. And for all of you hardcore people or people that have a lot of money, well, just get the M1 Max with 32 core graphics. So that is my suggestion to you guys. Of course, we will be actually putting these to the test. We're gonna compare against my Mac Pro, compare against the best 16-inch MacBook Pro. We're gonna compare the configurations between them to see what real world differences we get. So if you guys wanna see that, make sure you guys are subscribed. If you guys have any questions, ask me down in the comments section below about configurations or whatever else. Once again, big shout out to SquareSpace. If you guys need a website, you have an old one you need to upgrade or you just need to get one, it's easy, it's quick, they have really great customer support, and the prices are very, very affordable. I have a link down below. Thank you, SquareSpace. I was recommending them before they even sponsor the channel, so that is a no-brainer. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.